Hi everyone, welcome to today's chat. What I want to talk to you about one of my favourite topics, which is about the vagus nerve. So I know I've mentioned about the vagus nerve previously, but I thought this time around I'd delve a little bit more deeply, particularly in regards to its relationship with digestion, hormones, and also typical menopause symptoms. And it's also my favourite nerve, so I don't really need an excuse to rant on about it. So just to recap, the vagus nerve is the longest nerve that comes from the brain. Vagus means wandering, and is actually made up of two nerves, as are all what we call brain nerves or cranial nerves. And it basically connects the brain to various organs all along the way, finishing at the colon or the large intestine. And one of the things that it does is it stimulates a brain chemical called acetylcholine. And that brain chemical actually regulates automatic and unconscious functions, which includes digestion. So it stimulates contractions in our food pipe, our esophagus, and moves the food down through what's called peristalsis. It stimulates saliva production. It regulates our appetite. It does a whole bunch of things in relation to having a healthy digestion. It regulates our heart rate. It basically lowers our heart rate, our blood pressure, and also blood vessel activity. So anything to do with the heart and the blood vessels. Regulates our breathing. It regulates our kidney function. It regulates our glucose balance as well in our blood. And it also is responsible for our reflexes, such as coughing, sneezing, swallowing, vomiting, crying, sweating, and orgasms as well. So it's a really important part because it's connected to all of our organs. It's a really important part of those automatic functions that we don't necessarily think about. They're just going on in our background. And it's particularly stimulated or activated when we're in what's called the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's our relaxed state. So that's what's called the rest and digest, because when we rest, we're much more likely to digest our food properly. And sometimes it's called the feed and breed, because it's the nervous system that really is responsible for our reproduction as well. Now, there's no specific test to see if your vagus nerve is working properly or not. Doctors usually test for your gag reflex. So that's when they put like a wooden stick or a swab at the back of your throat and you go, bleh. And if you don't gag, then that can indicate a problem. So usually what happens is if you've got any problems with your digestion or your heart, then a doctor might consider the further assessment might be necessary. So how do you know if there's a problem with your vagus nerve? It can get damaged, but usually it might be that you have problems speaking, or your voice might change. You might have difficulty swallowing. If that's the case, you have to go to a GP and get that checked, because it can mean other things too. Maybe that loss of the gag reflex, your blood pressure is really low. You may have a really fast heart rate or really slow heart rate. You can have fainting and dizziness due to a rapid drop in blood pressure or heart rate. Nausea and vomiting can sometimes suggest that maybe that reflex isn't quite working properly when you've got no idea why you're doing it. Lots of abdominal pain and bloating can sometimes be a result of the vagus nerve not functioning properly. Severe reflux, again, you go to a GP and get that checked. And sometimes if you have heart disease or breathing problems, that can also, that's as a result of the vagus nerve not working properly, that can also create depression and anxiety too. So specific gut issues that can come about when the vagus nerve doesn't function properly, as I said, it stimulates stomach acid production. So when we're really stressed, the vagus nerve won't really be activated, won't be working properly. Or if your vagus nerve, they call it low vagal tone, it's not kind of functioning properly, then you can get reflux. And it's not because you've got high stomach acid and therefore you need to have medication like a omeprazole. It's actually because you're usually really stressed that's affecting your vagus nerve, and that's then causing the reflux. There is a condition called gastroparesis, and that can occur as a result of the vagus nerve not working properly. And that stops the movement of food specifically from leaving the stomach into the intestines. It stops that movement of food moving through. So when the stomach doesn't empty properly, it can actually cause bloating in the upper part of your abdomen, around in your tummy, and it can cause pain, it can cause bloating, it can cause reflux, it can cause real feeling of discomfort. It can create a loss of appetite, particularly if you find that you eat food or even drink water and then you feel really full, even after a tiny amount. And also, it can create a huge amount of weight loss and fluctuations in your blood glucose too. So it's definitely worth getting that looked at if you think that's playing a role. So stress inhibits the vagus nerve, which basically then affects the gut, and that then affects the gut microbiome, and that is associated with irritable bowel syndrome and inflammatory bowel disease as well, because it can then create dysbiosis, this imbalance of good and bad bacteria and inflammation in the gut. So the vagus nerve is really important for healthy digestion, and stress is the number one reason. So there are things that can affect the vagus nerve, like accidents that affect your pelvic floor region, that can cause problems with the vagus nerve, but more often than not, it's stress that's actually causing the problems. In regards to hormones and weight, the vagus nerve actually stimulates the release of oxytocin, which is our love bonding hormone. It also stimulates testosterone, which we need for ovulation, we need for our sex drive and our oomph. And it also stimulates the parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid is basically right next to your thyroid in your throat. That's really important in order to make active vitamin D in our body. So really important for those hormones. Insulin stimulates the vagus nerve, and it appears that the vagus nerve stimulates insulin release from the pancreas too, and also plays a role in how sensitive we are to insulin. There have been some animal studies that show that by stimulating the vagus nerve can actually help improve insulin sensitivity, which is really important if you know that you have problems with blood glucose, problems with insulin, you might be insulin resistant and pre-diabetic or diabetic, then actually stimulating the vagus nerve may help. There's a link between high amounts of blood glucose, which can damage the vagus nerve, and that can be a link between that diabetes and gastroparesis. So gastroparesis, that's stopping the movement of food flowing through your gut. It's really common in diabetics, and that's because the glucose can damage the vagus nerve. We know that thyroid hormone, T3, stimulates the vagus nerve. That increases appetite by stimulating the production of a hormone called ghrelin. And ghrelin tells the vagus nerve to tell the brain we're hungry. And any dysfunction in this communication can also affect your hunger and appetite. There was some suggestion that when vagal nerve activity is diminished, then our heart rate can change. And that can be associated with hot flushes. So if you're getting lots of hot flushes and you're going through perimenopause, menopause, again, by stimulating the vagus nerve, that might help with that. There's some great studies that show there's a link between the vagus nerve and the development of obesity, and that by stimulating the vagus nerve, that can possibly help with weight loss. The vagus nerve helps to reduce inflammation, can balance our hormone production, especially progesterone, encourages the production of melatonin, our sleep hormone, and as I said earlier, can decrease insulin and insulin resistance, which then will support a healthy weight too. And there was a really interesting study recently that showed that the vagus nerve might be a really useful treatment for endometriosis, because there seems to be a link between the progression of endometriosis and a decrease in vagal function too. So again, showing you that the vagal nerve is really important for our gut and our hormones and a whole bunch of other functions. So how can we stimulate our vagus nerve? So first and foremost, we have to manage our stress. We have to find ways to relax. So the vagus nerve, as I said, is part of what we call the parasympathetic nervous system, which is a bit like, as I've said, if you imagine our nervous system, particularly what we call the autonomic nervous system, or automatic nervous system, is like a car. When we're on the go all the time, we've got lots of cortisol going out, our sympathetic nervous system is in charge, and that's like putting your foot on the accelerator. Our parasympathetic nervous system is a bit like a brake in the car. So if we have our foot on the accelerator constantly, we're either going to crash the car or we're going to stop because we run out of fuel. So we have to put our foot on the brake and take a rest sometimes. And we need a balance of both. And the vagus nerve is stimulated when we put our foot on that brake. We're in that parasympathetic nervous system state. So managing your stress, finding ways to relax and rest is really, really, really important. So there's been a few things that you can try that we know stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. Yoga, for sure, there's got a lot of research on yoga helping. Diaphragmatic breathing. So this is when you do these like deep belly breaths. So you breathe in and you stick your belly out like a balloon, and then you breathe out and you squeeze your belly button to your spine. That activates pressure receptors in the heart and the neck, which we call baroreceptors, and that sends signals to the brain telling it to activate the vagus nerve. So really important that you do these deep belly breathing exercises. Meditation and Tai Chi have also both been found to be really beneficial. Next thing, chanting, singing, gargling, laughing, coughing. They all stimulate the vagus nerve. So they're all around your throat, and the vagus nerve kind of comes down through and down. So this is kind of stimulating this area. So try some laughter yoga. Some really interesting research on laughter yoga stimulating the vagus nerve. Another idea is chewing gum. That boosts the release of a hormone called CCK from the gut, which then helps to kind of deal with the communication from the vagus nerve to the brain. Exercise has been shown to stimulate the vagus nerve. And that stimulates gut flow and heart rate as well. Cold water showers and baths have been shown to trigger the parasympathetic nervous system and the vagus nerve. If you're not brave enough for a cold shower, then try splashing your face with cold water to start with. There's a little bit of research. There's more research needs to be done. More of this is anecdotal, but it may help, and it can help with a lot of people. Massages, especially the head massage, neck, shoulders, and also feet, can stimulate the vagus nerve. Sleeping on the right side of your body has also shown a greater stimulation than sleeping on your left, and lying on your back will actually decrease activation. And whilst there isn't a vagus diet, there are certain foods and nutrients that can stimulate the vagus nerve too. So these foods include anything that's part of the Mediterranean style diet. So foods that are rich in omega-3 fatty acids, like fish, nuts, seeds, green leafy veggies, polyphenol-rich red wine, nuts, yogurt, eggs, some meat, little tiny bit of meat, not a lot, some fish, quinoa, kidney beans. They're all rich in things like choline, zinc, and B12, and they have all been shown to stimulate and support the nervous system in general, but in particular the vagus nerve. It's really important to make sure that you are eating enough sodium. You don't want to have too much. It's a bit like Goldilocks. You don't want too much, but you don't want to consume too little either. So it's important to make sure you've got a good balance. And we know that junk foods rich in high refined saturated fats and highly refined carbohydrates don't do your vagus nerve and your nervous system in general any good. The other thing is something called electrical stimulation, or a TENS machine. There's been quite a few research articles to show that when you do some kind of electrical stimulation, it stimulates these sort of pulsed magnetic field waves, and they target the vagus nerve, and you can actually place them on your ears, on your neck, on your abdomen, and that can help kind of stimulate. So if you've got problems with your digestive system, it might be that using a TENS machine can actually help to stimulate digestion by stimulating the vagus nerves. So the key point of all of this is really to show that the vagus nerve is so important for our general health, including our gut health and our hormones and our weight. And whilst nutrition plays a massive, important role, managing our stress is hugely important. If you're having any problems with your hormones and they're not really at the right levels, if you're having any problems with your digestion, if you are having trouble to lose or maintain weight, then absolutely exercise and diet are really, really important, but also look at what you can do to support your nervous system and stimulate this vagus nerve, because it plays a massive role in all of those things too. So I hope you found this interesting. Please let me know what you think. If you go to my blog on my website, there's about 21 different references that you could go and have a read of if you wanted to. And if you wanted to know more about the vagus nerve and ways to stimulate it, let me know how you get on. Go and start going to a laughter yoga class, or start chanting or singing or gargling or having a ice cold bath, and let me know how you get on. So have a fantastic day. I hope you found that interesting, and we'll see you soon. Take care.